Good morning. Welcome to you. And thank you for joining us here at Malhut as we commence part 2 of Kingdom Seed in the series Getting Comfortable with Your Money. Last time we met on this particular topic, we looked at seed, and we did indicate and identify that without seed and soil, there can be no sustained continuity in life in its various forms. Among other things, we spoke about the fact that we are both seed and soil. Seed represents potential. A seed in and of itself is nothing. To fulfill purpose or its function, it requires specific conditions. A seed planted in fertile mind can bring one of the most powerful life experience we could ever have, as we have the potential to create great things from nothing. From Psalm 1, we did hammer out a path for the man who is like a tree that bringeth forth his fruit in season. His path, he delights himself in the law of the Lord. In that law that he meditate day and night. What was his outcome? He was like a tree planted by the rivers of water that bringeth forth its fruit in season. Its leaf, as the passage declared, shall not wither, and whatsoever he doeth shall prosper. We also did make the point that our hearts need to be rightly aligned with kingdom principles. What do we mean by that? Even though we are here talking about money and wealth, our focus ought to be on our purpose for which God has sent us. We ought to delight ourselves in the law of the Lord. Today, we're going to move into another segment, and we are going to look at land and time. I know some presentations before have raised the matter and have discussed probably in depth the whole matter of land, but I just want to mention a few things as it relates to land. So as previously stated, seed without soil is literally useless. So land is very critical and important. Also time. The Bible speaks of seed time and harvest time. Time is a critical factor in the creation of wealth. I remember as a youngster in my first job, met an elderly lady who later was my mentor and my mother in the Lord. And she always has this statement to declare: time is money and money is time. And I wondered what kind of a riddle it was, but later on in life I began to understand more clearly what that meant. So as we even speak of money, the time value of money is very important, and it's something we're going to look at a little later on from now. But even more important, timing is everything. Timing. Walk in your seasons. There's nothing more awkward than to see someone who has not related to the seasons of their life. Paul, I think it was one who said that when I was a babe, I behaved as a babe. But as a man, we must behave as man. So we ought to know our seasons and function accordingly. Interestingly, both land and time are limited factors or limiting factors. And I'm going to say something about that also in a little while. And before we go into that, I want us to just look at two passages of scripture. The very first one is in Joshua chapter 1 and verse 6. Just one verse there. Be strong and of good courage, for unto this people shall thou divide for an inheritance the land which I swear unto thy fathers to give them. So the matter of land, as I said, is critical. I'm going to read the second passage right now, and it's from Proverbs 6, and it's verses 6 to 11. And it reads thus: Go to the ant, thou sluggard, and consider her ways, and be wise, which having no guide, overseer, or ruler, provideth her meat in the summer, and gathereth her food in the harvest. How long wilt thou sleep, O sluggard? When wilt thou arise out of thy sleep? Yet a little sleep, a little slumber, a little folding of the hands to sleep. So shall thy poverty come as one that travelleth, and thy want as an armed man. So against those two passages of scripture, I'm going to delve into our subject a little deeper this morning. Limiting factor. I recall as a youngster, just in school learning accounts, we were doing cost accounting at the time, and one of the very important points that I'll never forget that the teacher spoke to us about: if you have a problem and it relates to a question surrounding the costing and the production of a manufacturing sort of environment, the first thing you need to determine is what is the limiting factor. So you look at all the resources that you employ. You have factory space, you have workers, you have raw material, and you can go on with a host of other things. You could look at power, your source of power, and I remember that particularly because in those days when I was learning this, Jamaica had a problem of always having load shedding and all that sort of thing. So anybody in the manufacturing environment must know what is the likely amount of hours of power that you're likely to receive from the electricity providers. So the limiting factor is critical, and you must begin to work your problem through and determine what is your likely level of production during a particular period of time, and by further extension, the profit that you are likely to generate. So if raw material is a limiting factor, then you must begin to look at the level of supply of raw materials you'll have, the quantity you'll have over that period, because nothing else of all the resources that you're going to employ at that time is going to be impacted more than your supply of raw material. So that so if your raw material supply, let us just say, is a ton of paper, if you're in the paper manufacturing business, no matter what you do, no matter how much labor you have, no matter how much factory space you have, no matter how much machinery you have, what is going to be your output cannot extend beyond the amount of paper that you will have available during the period of production. So limiting factors are important. So as we said today, we are looking at land, and we are also going to be looking at time. Now, land, if you and I would be, those of you listening on the platform would be well aware that that production line has been discontinued. So land is limited. By that I mean that land is no longer being made. The land space across the globe is pretty much what it was 50 years ago, 100 years ago, for all intents and purposes. So land is a limiting factor. And so even from the example I gave you in the production environment, the limiting factor now becomes the critical factor in anything that you are doing. So land that is no longer being produced, it's limited in quantity, while at the same time, the population of the earth continues to increase on a daily basis. So land becomes now a matter, a commodity that is determined by demand and supply. So as the demand for land increases, because with every human being that is born in the earth, it puts a further demand for land space, for living, for agriculture, because we need to feed ourselves, and all the various ways in which we utilize land. So if we invest in land, you're almost guaranteed to see its value appreciate over time because it is limited and the demand for it continues to grow daily. Land can be acquired for many purposes, such as investment, to set up a business establishment, for home or residence, and as we said, for agricultural purposes. One of the things that we have been seeing in the news recently is, I don't know if you have heard of this company, Cascade Investments. They are the company that manages the wealth of the Gates. And we would have learned that in recent times they have acquired vast quantities of agricultural land across the United States in particular. And that, I think, emphasizes and highlights the point that I've made earlier about how critical land is, particularly when it comes now to the matter of food, because we must plant a seed in the soil in order for us to have food to feed ourselves. The other thing too that is highlights the critical nature of land. We in Jamaica here have had many dialogues and news reports about how the Chinese are acquiring vast acreages of land and some of the best land in our country. They have a strategic goal in ensuring that they lay their hands tightly on land, productive land that is good for agriculture, not just here in Jamaica, but across the globe. It's a strategy that they have been pursuing, and they have been doing it quietly. But I think it's now evident to just about everyone what their strategy is. Secondly, the Catholic Church is another. Themselves and the Chinese are, I think, the largest holders of land across the globe. And the value will unfold over time. It will certainly accrue to the wealth of the holders of land who have invested in ensuring that they have their hands on adequate quantities. Now, I want to pause a little bit here just to speak to us about the matter of housing, because especially in our environment in Jamaica, there are so many of our people who have no place to live, who have no land of their own. I read the passage over in Joshua 1:6, and I particularly chose that passage because I want us to understand that God has an interest in us having land. The children of Israel, he made sure that he advised Moses, who shared this information with Joshua, how the land was to be divided among the 12 tribes. So if you are in the business of acquiring land, you are in the mind of God. You are where God supports you and wants you. God wants every one of us to acquire land. First of all, as a place for us to be able to rest our head, a dwelling place, a place where our families can go to sleep at night without wondering if the landlord will turn up in the morning and evict us. So if you have acquired land for that purpose, or you are in the pursuit of it, you're in the mind of God, you have the support of God. I want to just say something though, as we to guide us as we even pursue land, particularly for housing purposes. Sometimes we make the mistake of wanting to identify what is our dream home, to acquire that. But that approach can really cause you to the acquisition to elude you for a long time, because you don't need to start with your dream home. You can start by just acquiring a piece of land. You can just start by acquiring a home that needs repairs, that needs renovation. but start anywhere where you can, so that you can quickly lay your hand on some land as fast as possible. And I say that because if you start with land and having acquired it, maybe you might have done so through a mortgage, or you might have been able to do a cash purchase. If you started with a mortgage, once you acquire the land, you can gradually pay that mortgage down and build up your savings. And as you do so, then you are now in a position to start construction on the land. And even at the construction stage, you might not start the building with the view of the dream home, but you can start it in phases, or you can start and carry that project through in various phases until completion. So it doesn't put that much strain and pressure on you. And so you can acquire your home through this simple step of breaking down the project into phases. Now, you can also look at the acquiring of a home as an investment, first of all. So there's a home that is going reasonably. It's not the home that you want, and maybe it's not even the very place that you want to live. It's not that location. But you can put enough resources to acquire that piece of asset, that piece of land, and probably a house on it. And then over time, you can renovate it if it needs renovation, and you could rent it out. You don't even have to live in it. And I'm speaking particularly to our youngsters, and youngsters who are probably just finishing their first degree, or whatever is your level of education, and you are going out into the work world. You will still have the good luxury of being under your parents' roof. What you can do during this time is to begin to create some savings and acquire any kind of property that you can. And I say that kind of guardedly still. There are some areas that you don't want to run the risk of investing there, but invest in something that you see has a future in it. So you can invest in a home, renovate it, rent it, as I say. You have the rental income coming. You can either be using that to pay down a mortgage if you had a mortgage, or you could be putting that into savings. And at a point in time when it has appreciated, because we've already laid the foundation and the groundwork to say that land value will keep going up, housing value will keep going up. So when it comes to a particular point in time when you can sell it, you would have at that time have significant interest in that bit of asset that you could now convert and now use it to go on to purchase something else, or even get to the dream home that you are contemplating. I also want to say that in that process, take time to go out and inquire, find out what are the opportunities and benefits that are available to you. The Housing Trust has a lot in terms of offerings. Go and see, talk to them, and find out and see what is there that you could access. I remember in my younger days, I never paid much attention to it, and one day the Lord just said to me, go. And when I went there, I found out that you could get a loan from them to purchase land. So although it's called a housing trust, you're thinking of, well, it's about buying house, but you can also buy land through a loan from them and leave the land there, pay down your mortgage, the land will continue to appreciate, and then after you have brought it to a manageable level, you can then borrow more to start your construction. So I hope that will encourage those of us and open our eyes to the possibility of acquiring a home, because that is so significant in the life of our people. It gives us the confidence sometimes that we need to move on in life. When we are in a tenanted situation, sometimes it brings all sorts of burdens. It ties us up as we the pressure is on us to have somewhere of our own for our families and ourselves. So get up and move on and pursue and find out and acquire a piece of land for yourself if you have not already done so. And as I've said before, you can use land for all other sorts of purposes. You can, for agricultural purposes, you can have land that you could subdivide and speak with your developers and speak with your financial institutions about how you might even get loans and construct and sell houses if you are in such a position. So we must be our approach must be purposeful and aggressive. Joshua 1 clearly states to us that squatters won't come out with a white flag raised easily. We have to go in. And that is why as Israel approached Canaan, they had to send spies in because they were people who possessed the land, and from God's word to Israel, these persons were squatters and should be driven out. And we know about the battles of Jericho and many others that they had to undertake in order to possess the land. So land will not come to us, as it were. We have to become aggressive and purposeful in order to achieve and in order to lay hold upon that land. It's promised to us, but we need to go after it. Time. Time is the next very important factor that we spoke about. We need to come into a level of consciousness as it relates to time, because time is not only money, and money is not only time, but it is also a limiting factor on our very time here in earth. So time is a limiting factor. And I want to say something again about a limiting factor, because I recall when I was in my teens, there was a program going on which was called the Apollo Space Program. And many of us will remember Apollo 11 and its mission to the moon, and the first men that were able to put foot on the moon. A couple missions after that, there was a mission, I think Apollo 13 it was, that went to the moon, and upon its return, the spacecraft developed a mechanical issue. And so the power on board became very, very limited. And NASA told us at the time that every calorie of energy had to be saved and had to be used in its most frugal way in order to save all the energy that spacecraft could muster for its re-entry into Earth. The reason for that is that in order for the space capsule to change direction, what they had to do is to fire off a rocket, and that rocket would, depending on the angle and everything else that goes into the physics of it, that angle and the force will determine the direction that the spacecraft takes. So because power became a limiting factor on board, to the extent that I recall the astronauts could not even shave. They became all bearded men by the time they came back to Earth. They could not operate their electric shave to take a cleanup of their faces and so on, because they had to save that energy. And we were told that at that specific point in time on its as it approached Earth, they had to fire this rocket from the capsule to ensure that the spacecraft was now aligned with Earth. And from the distance where they were, they said that even the most minute error, would result in them missing Earth by miles. So, and the fact of the matter is that because they did not have enough energy on board to have a second shot at it, they had to make it right. So when we're speaking with limiting factor and its impact, it can be extremely significant. And I pause to mention that particular situation because with our lives, it is so necessary that we make sure that we are aligned, because sometimes when we miss an opportunity in life, it may not come back to us. I had an elder one time who said to me that opportunity is locked in the front and balled in the back. So once it passes you and you grab on at the back, there's nothing to catch. And so we must ensure that we manage our time, and we not only manage our time, but we walk in the steps that the Lord has ordained for us, even before the very foundation of the earth. So the second passage we read, it says, "Go to the ant, thou sluggard, and consider her ways, and be wise. Having no guide nor overseer or ruler, provided meat in the summertime." So you have to know in the times when there's time for you to plant and to harvest, you must do so, because there comes the winter time when you have to gather food. If you did not plant during the planting time, you have nothing to gather. When it comes to winter, you have no harvest. And we don't need to go through the entire passage. There's a lot in there that is instructive to us, and we can do that in our own time. I particularly want to speak to our youngsters because time is your friend. Time is your friend. You have a life before you, and if you wisely use your time, it can be beneficial to you in the latter years. In the realm of business, how significant is time? I'm going to talk a little bit about the power of compounding, and that is using time to work for you. And I think I recall Dr. Moshe saying God is not in the addition business, he's in the multiplication business. And compounding is about multiplication. And tied to that, and with the discipline of saving, our savings, we can amass quite a significant amount of resources. Savings is very critical in any community and any society, because it's the savings of one person that becomes the borrowing of another person. And communities, societies must know how to put aside or to make sacrifices and not consume everything today that you're able to produce, but put aside some for the benefit of mobilizing resources on which we can build and expand our base, multiply our assets, and move our societies and our communities forward. So as it relates to, and I'm going to, as I say, speak to the matter of compounding in a little, but as it relates to a limiting factor on us, because we are time-bound creatures, the Bible speaks that we have 70 in this period of time. Some of us, by virtue of strength, might be able to go beyond that period, but it clearly states that we are limited in terms of time. So it's important not to procrastinate when we have things to do, not to delay. In fact, I want to say to us that that's a strategy that the enemy uses. Yes, he finds ways for us to make our days go by with nothing productive to show for it. And he uses all kinds of strategies. He gets us involved in things that are not tied to our purpose. And so we have to be careful. We also need to realize that we should not be slothful in business, but we are to make sure that we respect time, and whatever time we use to pursue any assignment, we should do it well so that we don't have to redo it and waste time. We can be busy about everything while achieving nothing. So we must ensure that we use our time effectively. Very importantly also, we must ensure that we are never too busy that we can't find time for God. I did in the first presentation made the point that the pursuance of wealth without wisdom, wisdom comes from God, and we can only lay our hands on wisdom when we spend time with God and the Word of God. And as I said, the pursuit of wealth without wisdom can be a very dangerous thing. So we must make sure that we spend time with God, spend time in His presence, so that He can guide us, He can order our steps along the path of the mission that He has designed and purposed for us, why He sent us here on earth. He will bring order to our lives. We will result in the accurate arrangement of things so that we can move in our seasons. Now, on the matter of compound interest, I did a little calculation so that I could give us some sort of an indication of what compounding does and how a discipline of saving over time can result in significant rewards and benefits. If we have an initial investment of say $100,000 and we were to place that somewhere where we can get an interest rate of say 3% per annum, we're not getting much more than that, if even that much these days. But bear me through, because this is just to make a point. If in addition to putting that 100,000, investing it in somewhere where we can get a 3% return, we also are putting away say $5,000 a month, and I use a 5,000 figure because a week has 4 months, and surely if you and I are honest and reflect on how we spent the last couple of months and how we spent whatever monies that came to us, we can find instances where we did handle our money a little loosely at times. And if we were to be very vigilant and ensure that we are frugal in how we spend our resources, we could find that maybe on a monthly basis we could save $5,000. Maybe you are not in a position where you would be able to save that much, but for the purposes of this exercise, let us say you're able to put aside $5,000 at the start of every month onto this initial investment that you have of $100,000. Over a 15-year period, this amount of money translates into a total of $1,294,000, roughly $500 in 15 years. And when you look at the interest you have earned, it's $294,000, roughly $500. That's really 29% on the initial amount, as well as the monthly $5,000 that you would have been contributing to that particular savings program. Now, you don't get significant interest on monies these days that you put in the bank. I recall there was a long period in my life and in our Jamaican experience here when we had a situation where we call certificate of deposits could earn as much as double digits, 15, 20, 25% per annum on it. And we wouldn't want to go back into that kind of environment, because what it does, it drives away investments into plant and into productive purposes that is necessary for any community to grow. So I'm not advocating that we look at anything like that going forward, but I want to say that instead of say investing in a savings account or in any sort of financial instrument. If we consider putting that into another type of productive environment, into some kind of a business venture, what we're going to find is that that same kind of double-digit growth that we went through in Jamaica on CDs in the past is something that you can still enjoy today if you were to put it into business. Because the average business, I would say modestly, properly managed, could give you a 15% return per annum on whatever you have invested into it. And I think that is very modest. So if we were to consider a 15% return on our investment in some productive sources, or you could find at the end of 15 years, that same $100,000 with a $5,000 added at the start of every month would now become $4,320,000 approximately. So what am I saying? I'm saying to us, we need to start considering how we might find ideas and put our savings together in a way into business, and so that it might grow for us and grow at a modest rate of 15%, I think is achievable. If you even take the food distribution business, if my memory serves me right, what like the supermarkets would do is have a gross markup of somewhere in the region of 40% on whatever it is that they purchase for resale in their business. And it varies sometimes according to the product or the item, because some items have very slim margins while others will have higher. But overall, they aim at somewhere about 40 or 45% gross. So from that, so if they say buy $100,000 worth of things, they would mark that up by 40-45%. So they would sell it for $145,000 at the end of the day, and they would have $45,000 left, from which they pay for their expenses, whether it's rental for space, staff wages, and your utilities, and so on. And usually after that, if you manage your thing properly and tightly, you should end up with probably somewhere of 20-25%. And you have to also look at scale, mind you, because the size of your turnover will to a large extent impact what you make at the end of the day. So somebody said to me one time when I was young, so your aim must be to small profit but turn over your volume. That's too is something that should be carefully examined. But if we now look at that same 100,000 investment over the same 15-year period, adding 5,000 at the start of each month, and look at a rate of return of 25% over 15 years, that figure now jumps to $13,870,000. So there is great benefit to consider business. We are taught to a large extent when we leave school, we are to get a job and to you end up being an employee, you work for others. It's a place to start. It might be just where you have to start. But I want to say to us that we need to change our thinking, understand that we have God-given talents, and especially if we have made time with God and we are walking with Him, He can give us great ideas, give us great downloads, give us business ideas and ventures that we could then transform ourselves from out of the employee environment into becoming an employer. So that is a way of growing your wealth at a faster pace and will have greater significance on your family and your community. So let us as we leave out of this discussion today, or out of this presentation, let us consider that, to see it's going to be very difficult. It's very few persons who will work for someone else and at the end of the day amass any great level of wealth that can take their generation from this level to the other level. So the other thing too is when you are in business, then it opens a lot of doors for growing the business, for moving it into leaps and bounds. So for example, there's in economics something that they call backward and forward integration. So you can grow your business through that, through those channels. So when you started your business, maybe you used to have to purchase transportation services. If say you're in the retail business, the food business, and to move your stuff from your warehouse or wherever, you had to employ the services of someone who had transportation. Over time, as your business grows, and you assess it, you might find that it is more economical for you to provide your own transportation services. Get your own trucks and hire your own drivers, because when you do make the necessary assessments, and you find that you are able to save more to your business and make your business expand at an even faster rate. If you are in in agriculture, one of the things that as a nation we're been saying is that we need not only to be the primary producers, but then once the food comes out of the ground, to be able to translate that into the various packaging, the packaging process, so that we can get it out and get it onto the shelves of consumers. So we can not just be the primary, because usually the primary producer of any goods and service tend to be the least rewarded of all. One of the things I like about one of our own local companies here, which is now, in my opinion, a global company, is Grace Kennedy. They are in the business of agriculture, but they're also in the business of food processing. So they would do canning and packaging of all sorts, and they're also right in the distribution chain, their own supermarkets. So they have removed all the middlemen in the process, and so every middleman that is removed in the process, it brings greater wealth into your own business and allow you to grow. So these are things. Tankwell, one of the big fabrication companies, and they are now into so many other things. They are even into the whole matter of providing or supplying the market with vehicles. But one of the things I like about them, they have their own port over there in, is it Trelawney? Yes, I think it's actually in Trelawney, Rio Bueno, where they have a port there. So they have cut out a lot of the cost and charges that would have accrued to them, because they do business in importation in such volumes that it suited them. Instead of to come through the ports in Kingston, they have their own port there, and it's so profitable that they can transport by road all their steel that comes in to Kingston, to their main outlet of the Washington Boulevard. So the matter of backward and forward integration as you go into business is very, very critical, and one that can accrue benefits. So we want to be like a tree planted by the water, that bringeth forth its season, that bringeth forth its fruit in season, and that our leaf shall not wither, and whatever we do shall prosper. So I'm saying to us today, where is our hearts? Where is our hearts? Are we aligned with kingdom principles? It is going to be very significant, because when we are aligned with kingdom principles, we have the other added benefit where we are in line with the purpose for which God has brought us into this work, into this world, so that the ideas that are necessary to meet a human need is able to download that into our spirits, and we are able to translate that into something in a business form that can accrue benefits. It solves problems of humanity. It solves a problem in our community, whatever it might be. As we pursue that, we can also make great gains that we can bring into the kingdom and can add to the expansion of God's kingdom. All right. I trust that the ideas I've shared with us today are very useful, and that we would be able to begin to have regard for the time that we have. Have regard for the time that we have. It is a limiting factor. Have regard for the seasons of our lives, because it is those times in which it's designed for certain things to happen. The Bible, as I said, says to us there is seed time and there is harvest time. And we can't plant seed when it's time to harvest. It just won't work. We have no control over that. It's the Master who determines that. So might our lives be ordered. Might we order our lives as we delve into the Torah and as we allow God to lead us and bless us. God bless you.